Shabbat Shalom. Just had a heart attack. You see the parasha on the screen. I said, well, definitely that I prepared the wrong one. Shabbat Ekev, because again, this time of the year when we can clearly see that the Torah cycle is come to an end. We can see through the scroll the right side much heavier than left side, and which means the high holidays is definitely not far away from us now. Last week's parasha, we had Moshe resign the Torah and repeating the Ten Commandments, telling the people of Israel to love God with all their hearts and bind his words to their hands and between their eyes. And he basically was reiterating one of the central prayers in Judaism. This week, the parasha Ekev, Moshe continues basically with the same theme. It starts with Moshe promising the people of Israel that they will enjoy prosperity and good health only if they walk in God's ways. Moshe mentioned to people of Israel, good things will happen to you all. As the parasha started, God will keep his covenants he promised to your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Yaakov, and he will love you and bless you and multiply you. But, a big but, all will depend how you respond to it. Either you will eat and be satisfied and bless God, remembering that all things comes from Adonai, or you will eat and be satisfied and forget to whom you owe all the prosperity and blessings. And thinking, it all comes from your efforts. We've done all, it's our craft hands, it's our hard working. In one level, it may seem like a small difference, but it's made all the difference. Now, when you read this parasha, you could, it's kind of, some of it is a repetition. We've seen it, things happen, and so on. And we know, the Israelites has been on the wilderness for 40 years. I suppose the expectation here will be, right, hard times all behind you, yeah? You spent 40 years in the deserts, you didn't have a place where you could call home. Sometimes there was no water to drink, there was no food. You were attacked by your enemies. You are a bunch of people. You have all done well, to come up, to get up to here. You have passed the test of your strength and perseverance. It only take 40 years. You passed the test. Now, all you have to do is to walk towards the promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey, but possibly also blood. Oh, by the way, I just forgot to mention one last simple test. You possess the land, but you also have to destroy the people so that you don't mingle and get used to their old habits and worship false gods. Clearly, Moshe was not. What Moshe was aiming to is no, let's put it away, the Israelites were righteous people. It's not whether they will, when they go into the promised land, take possession, they will have, starvation and so on. Moshe knew precisely what the challenge ahead will be. His vision of challenge ahead in one level is what exactly we are experiencing right now. The real challenge is not poverty, but abundance, affluence, too much of everything. It's not slavery, but freedom. It's not lack of place we call home. Perhaps is the fact that we know we have that warm place to go, light, water on demand, and so on. This is what Moshe was thinking ahead. Potentially, if we don't listen, if you don't remember, this will happen to people of Israel. If we look around the nation, all we see is nation distancing themselves from God, because they have everything in abundance. It's everything. It's too much of everything. God becomes, secondary. Life is too busy. There's no space for God. If you look around, there's lots of empty seats here. But if we go out there, supermarket shops, we see how packed they are. And what rabbis say, which I was a bit concerned, he was sort of, eating through my talk. That's literally 50% of it. The very truth is, being here today is a statement of faith. Because it's that choice of being out there and being here. We live in a country that, we have freedom. We can do more or less what we want. And perhaps too much freedom to acknowledge God's existence. And I was pondering on this because sometimes sit and say, oh, we have lots of freedom. Other countries, oh, if we have just a quarter of freedom of the West, we should do better. But the truth around it is, yes, in the beginning, when you get the freedom, it becomes people are focused, but eventually people tend to lose that focus, and we become all the same, and we become just like us in the West. The real challenge Moshe was aware of and knew our hearts will go cold and clearly detached from God. One thing that Moshe knew very clearly is that nations tend to be lifted to great heights when they face difficulty or when they're in danger. When a nation goes through crisis and times of hardship, people tend to grow together. They put aside their differences. That sense of community, solidarity grows exponentially. We went through the pandemic, and I will actually think about it. If we go back, let's say the core of pandemic, the lockdown, what we see around is that sort of sense of community. We look around, this charity shop open literally every single corner. I remember I put myself on this app, Good Sum, which they had about 500,000 volunteers in the first hour the app opened. And that was literally people want to volunteer to deliver food to people, to check and collect medicine and so on. And we have, streets of village WhatsApp groups where people will checking if people are okay and what they have and what they couldn't have. We see all this through the crisis. We come all together. But we are, basically what we could say, we are back in our feet. All this is waving, is disappearing, is fraying. And this is society. This is what Moshe was concerned about. Because the real test of a nation is not about surviving crisis. I mean, I haven't, I'll say fortunate enough, but maybe not all enough, let's put it away, to all through the First or Second World War. But what you can read are those, hard times. People were united. People were helping each other. And nations can survive crises, but the question is, can nations survive lack of crisis? Because the inability to stay strong during times of easy and plenty is this challenge that defeated every civilization that we can think of and empower known to history. Moshe the reminder of Moshe, consistently saying the same thing or repeating things is to make sure the people of Israel do not be defeated by the same cause that very many great civilizations be defeated. Moshe foresight very precisely and correctly, because throughout the history, when we see lots of great nations being on the top, practically invincible. We look at the Greek civilization, the Romans, we look at the empires across the world. They were, on their days, invincible. They had everything, defense, and you think of, no one could touch them. Where are they now? They decline and fall. And always for the reason that Moshe was reminding the Israelites. Because all these empires, the leaders and the people, they forgot. Their memories fades. The people lose the sights, the values that they once fought for. They all vanished. Because there was no reason to worry about. We are big enough, strong enough. No one will touch us. Just relax and enjoy the rides. All that justice, equality, independence, freedom, that's all gone. Because when an empire rises, you have like the sort of pyramid. You have the people on the top, maybe one or two on the very top, maybe two on the second top, and the mass on the bottom. And it's the people on the top that tend to start lose division, and the inequality start to grow. And that is what normally causes the fall of empires and civilization. Because simply, as I mentioned, some of the people on the top of the pyramid, they tend to get rich, become lax, self-indulgent. And the sense of social solidarity get lost. The duty of care for the poor disappear. Then, of course, the sense of injustice grows individually and prevail, because it's a battle of look after yourself because no one else will. And clearly no space for God there, because we passed that. God simply doesn't exist anymore. It's literally it's you or you. And at this point we have the scene set either for revolution or destruction, conquests. And there's been the danger that Moshe foresaw and warned about. But one thing Moshe has done is not just about telling what could happen, what will happen. It's about how can you avoid it? How can you stop that not to happen? He wants that step further and say, right, this might happen to you if you don't remember. Yeah. And he clearly put together, how this could be avoided. And his insight is as relevant now as it was then. Moshe spoke about the importance of memory for the moral health of a society. When you look at Judaism, most of the things we do is all about the listening. We listen. Because I was thinking, perhaps when we, Shammai, the center of Judaism, is that because they didn't have, printed Torah? But when you think about it, even today, it's not about having the books, because we still go to school. There's plenty of books these days. But we still have the need to go to school to listen to a teacher. And not just that, it's that commandment to be here, to congregate. It's not just the fact that, they had to listen. We hear listen, remember, because they couldn't have things printed out. It's nothing to do with that. Even those days, we looked how, the importance of the memory being an important component of conscious experience. And when we look through the book of Devarim, we see Moshe repeating several times the word remember. And I believe that was for a very good reason. I just put together some examples, and Because what I think, when you look at this example, you put things in context, you can actually understand why he keep on buying about the same thing, not one, not twice, not 3 times, 4, and so forth. I mean, the first verse, it goes back to Devarim 5:15. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt. When I read that, I stopped and I said, well, okay, right. So imagine you are a slave in Egypt. You start thinking, right, what happened to me? What did the Egyptian do to me? And of course, this will create a consciousness not to repeat the same thing to others. And then you go back, Devarim 8:2. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the desert for 40 years. Again, you remember, let's imagine for a second, living in the desert for 40 years. Clearly, lots of miracles had to happen. The desert is very hot and can be very cold in the evening. There's no water, there's no food. Again, all this bring that consciousness. It's not about us. There's God. God exists. And all we need to do is remember these things that bring us closer to God, because we know what he has done to our ancestors. But how do we remember things that we were told? How do you remember things that you're told? I mean, the simple answer would be listen. And this is basically take us straight back to the beginning of this parasha. Because you are listening to these rulings, keeping and obeying them, you'll be blessed. Now, again, this is kind of part of me. I like to see patterns of things, right? Now, one thing jumped to my attention. Moshe didn't say, obey and keep commandment. He started with listen. Yeah? It's not about obey the commandments, yeah? And then you keep them, and then you listen. Other around, listen, keep them, and obey them. Now, when we look into this into more details, we can see the words or the verb to listen, shama, is repeated about more than 92 times just on the book of Devarim. And that clearly gives that emphasis how important listening is in Judaism. Listening is crucial because Judaism is a non-visual culture. Yeah. It would be easier for the Greeks. They have their, they built, they have crucifixes and fake gods and so on. They could see things, but Judaism is different. It's a non-visual. We worship a God that we cannot see. We cannot make image of God because it's forbidden. In Judaism, we don't see God, but we hear God. Knowing is a form of listening in Judaism. You know things by listening. You go close to God by listening. Listen to God is to be open to God. That it was Moshe was trying to say throughout the book of Devarim. If you would only listen. Because by listening, when we listen, we understand. And if we understand, make that bridge, that link between keeping and obeying God's commandments. And one can say listening is one of the greatest gifts we can give to someone. Because when I just look at some I personally found a very good examples when it comes to listening. And I suppose some question as well. When, if we go back to Exodus, when Moshe, the Moshe encounter with God in that burning bush, Moshe self-confessed, I'm not a man of words. I'm a slow of speech and tongue. And of course, we know how it ends. But the question here is, why would God choose a man who found it difficult to speak to lead the Jewish people? But the reason behind that, perhaps, is because one who cannot speak learns how to listen. And we have a great example with King Solomon. In a dream, when Adonai came to him in a dream and asked him what he would like to be given. I mean, at that point, you're a king, if you're a king, I don't know how many people he was, overseeing, but talk about thousands of people. The easiest thing, because, for leaders, people that lead people they know, is the hardest part is leading people, because they are, mind of their own. I mean, the simplistic answer would be, right, God, I have 1,000 people. All I want to make my life easier, make them obedient. End of. Problem resolved. That would be 90% of his trouble resolved. He can, live on and relax. But what he's saying, his answer is completely different. All he wanted was a listening heart. That's all he wanted. Because he knew, as a leader, he will judge. And to be a judge is important to have, to have the ability to listen, to hear the emotion behind the words, and to sense what's being left unsaid, and as well as what was said. And Moshe was trying to, throughout the book, he's trying to tell the Israelites, and to some degree, us today, that God does not seek blind obedience. He wants us to listen, not just with our ears, but with our hearts and mind. Because, let us say, it's God Almighty, the Creator. If He simply wants obedience, it will be straightforward, just create a robot. Or remove them. It'll be straight. It's a robot, you press the button, it does exactly what you want. But we are human beings with free will, with set of our own mind or mindset. We do things erratical or rational or irrational. And if He simply wanted obedience, wouldn't He just be content with the company of the angels, which, they could constantly just sing God's praise and always do His will. But in making us, in creating us His image, He's created that uniqueness. And it's between, that sort of bridge between us and God. And what is in between is that conversation. And a conversation, there are two ways. Someone talks, someone listens. Yeah. And when we speak to others, it's kind of tell them who we are. But when we listen, we allow other people to tell us who they are. Now, if we cannot listen to other people, how can we listen to God? And these are all things that Moshe was very, very aware of. And we see on this parasha, and the parasha last week, that, we can see that the core of children's prayer, the Shema, is kind of, repeated last week, and we also this week. If you listen carefully to my mitzvah, which I'm giving you today, to love Adonai your God and serve Him with all your heart and all your being. This is a prayer that we recite day in, day out, Shabbat after Shabbat. Listen, 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 listen. I suppose at this point, right, if we imagine we all sit down on, sort of on that river bank, Moshe keep on talking about, I don't know how many days and months it took to go through this. You can just imagine one, this the Israelites are sitting there, okay, Moshe, just stop there. We can't hear you. And Moshe clearly replying, no, you don't. And you simply do not understand what's happening here. God Almighty is taking personal interest in your destiny. And look at you, one of the smallest nations, right? And perhaps not the most righteous nation. Do you have an idea? But again, it's that sort of repetition, because we as a human being, we don't like repetition. We tend to get bored, But the secret, the essence of this is listen. Because when you listen, regardless whether it's repetition, when you listen with open hearts, every time you listen to the same thing, you understand things differently. But that is the difference of listen just, hear the noise. You get bored of that. But when you listen with open hearts, even when you listen to the same thing 1,000 times, there's one element you didn't heard last time, understood last time, last week or the week before, last month. By hearing it over and over and over and over again with open heart, there's always one thing new, regardless the message or the content of it. Which make listening a profoundly, I'll say maybe a spiritual act. And in one hand, we can say listening can be painful. Yeah. It is much comfortable not to listen or not have to listen, because, you don't have to be challenged. Because, again, we talk about listening, it's just about the talk. If you talk to someone with a very different opinion, you might not say a word, but inside you are eating yourself. No, that's wrong. No, you shouldn't say that. That is not the right thing to say. You might not, you might not verbalize it, but it's inside. And this can be painful. Yeah? And it's that taking, ourselves into our comfort zone. And these things actually, things get worse, because with the new technologies, we can literally filter what we want to listen. We have Facebook friends. You disagree with me, I have friend you. Job done. Yeah. And we can literally target what we want to see, what we want to hear, and that's it. Everything that disagree or doesn't go our way, just delete it. But in a nutshell, what is people with different views, people that, let's say, not like us, make us grow when we listen. Because even the most, let's say, aberrant comments or whatever we listen for, someone that's completely different to us, if we listen, we can understand the rationale behind what that person is saying, why they think that way. And just to conclude, listening, I believe, to be one of the greatest gifts we can give to another human being. To be listened to be heard, is to know that someone else cares about us. Someone takes us seriously. And Moshe's challenge was literally all he wanted. Just listen. If we listen, if we really, really listen, we will keep God's commandments and obey God's, and we will be blessed. This is all he was trying to tell. Just listen, but not just the noise I'm making with your heart, and you will avoid what many civilizations couldn't. Shabbat Shalom.